Welcome to Counting the Cost, Al Jazeera's business program. I'm Mariam Namazi. Each week, we bring you all the business and economic news from around the world. Coming up on the show, picking up the pieces, an in-depth look at the recovery of war-torn economies.
No one was really asking why credit was so cheap.
Taking the long view, we speak to a woman who predicted the credit crisis and see what she has to say now. And escaping the recession, how alcohol sales remain steady despite the downturn. So is the recession over? France, Germany and Japan say it is for them. Economists believe the recession may be easing globally, but the recovery will take time. But time is not on the side of countries that have experienced conflict. Let's go over to Washington now for an in-depth look at the issues facing war-torn countries.
Yes, conflict has ravaged many nations, with the Middle East being no exception. The instability that war brings to countries often leaves their economies crippled. SHERINE TADROS travelled to the West Bank to examine how the economic conditions are changing for the people in the city of Nablus.
A journey bus driver OMAR al-SHAMEY hated making. The 50-kilometer trip from Ramallah to Nablus, two of the West Bank's main cities, would take him and his Palestinian passengers hours, if not the whole day, because of Israel's checkpoints along the way. But in recent months, Israel has eased restrictions at checkpoints surrounding Nablus, reportedly in response to US pressure. Now, the road ahead seems brighter.
Our biggest nightmare as drivers were the checkpoints leading to Nablus. I'd take passengers and always worry about how to get them through. Now it's much better with the checkpoints easing.
But easing is not dismantling. The signs of Israel's occupation are still as evident as ever.
Until now, the Israeli army still man the checkpoints. It's true, things are better. Some days we don't notice the soldiers. But on other days, they stop us for 1 or 2 hours, they search the cars, using the excuse they're looking for wanted people.
On the whole, for Palestinians trying to move around their own territory, there's been a definite improvement.
It's taken us just 40 minutes to get from Ramallah to here, the entrance point to Nablus. This is the Hawara checkpoint, once the worst bottleneck in the West Bank. Now you can see Israeli soldiers just waving cars past. The easing of restrictions here has transformed the city of Nablus.
For 9 years, Nablus lived under a strict Israeli siege, not just surrounded by checkpoints, but subjected to constant Israeli incursions, raids and curfews. Freer movement of goods and people seems to have boosted the economy as well as the morale of the city. A new cinema, shops, festivals have all contributed to a feeling of normalcy and security.
You know, it's completely different life. You know, we can move easily, we can travel easily, students can go to their universities also easily. We can go by car from Nablus, from the center of Nablus to Ramallah now. People become more cheerful nowadays. They are more happy nowadays.
Occupation and political instability are a daily reality for all Palestinians here. Hundreds of Israeli checkpoints and roadblocks, as well as the separation wall, still strangle the West Bank. But loosening the rope around the neck of Nablus shows the potential of the West Bank when it's given just a little space to breathe. SHERINE TADROS, Al Jazeera, Nablus in the occupied West Bank.
Joining us now to tell us more is Abdul Wahab Al-Kipsi from the Center for International Private Enterprise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anand.
When one looks at kick-starting an economy after a period of conflict, the question arises, where does one start? Presumably with the basics, things like food, housing, transport.
Yes, Anand. I mean, it's a very difficult procedure, laced with complexities, tremendous challenges, and there's no one-size-fits-all prescription. There isn't one. However, what's common amongst all these post-conflict, and let's hope the West Bank will become post-conflict sometime soon, it's still in conflict. But what's common in all these post-conflict situations is the need for a lot of balancing acts. So for example, the first balancing act is to balance what you said, the need for humanitarian aid, the need for food, the need for healthcare, with making that not compromise the need for long-term developmental objectives. So you need infrastructure, you need institution building. That's just one balancing act. Another balancing act, in my opinion, is the need to balance the need for a strong state, a state that can provide, that has enough strength, enough scope to provide security, to provide political stability, to provide a semblance of an environment where an investor can come in and invest. Now that strong state needs to be balanced so it does not compromise the need for the people to be involved in running the affairs of the state at the same time, running their own affairs. So they feel there's a sense of accountability towards the state, they feel that they have opportunity, they feel they have, they're participating. And the third balance, in my opinion, which is the most sensitive, is the need for international aid. It's a necessary condition to have international aid, financial resources, other resources, technical expertise. But what we lack most of the time is the need to include local civil society organizations, not just in the implementation, in the delivery of these services, but in the decision-making process, in designing the priorities, in designing the programs, and then in implementing. This inclusion of the local civil society, of local actors, most of the time includes the locals in ownership, in accountability. It's my program. I'm not depending on the international donors. So these balancing acts are extremely important.
What about an area like the West Bank? It is an area that is not rich in natural resources.
It is rich in human resources. The West Bank, if it becomes an independent state and becomes a post-conflict success story, can provide the technical expertise for the countries around it, can provide labor force, not the preliminary labor force for building infrastructure, but the technical expertise. We work with the organizations in the West Bank, and they tend to be most technologically advanced and highly educated. Now, in addition to that, the West Bank is receiving and will receive lots of resources, not just from the international community, but from the Arab and Islamic communities. And that can alleviate some of the need for local resources, oil, minerals, gas that's not available there. But they have, in my opinion, the most important resource, which is human resources. And if you think about the countries that have developed, look at Japan, very poor in natural resources, but very rich in human resources, and look what Japan is today.
Well, we have lots more to talk about, but let's move on for now. Bosnia, like the West Bank, is no stranger to conflict. The 1990s saw the nation embroiled in a devastating war which left many dead and the country in a state of political and economic instability. More than a decade later, the Bosnian economy, which still seems to be struggling with an unemployment rate of 40%. Barnaby Phillips visited this war-torn country to find out more.
A battle of strength and an old tradition revived after the bloody years of war. Bosnia's Serbs have come to watch the bullfight and enjoy the fare. These people feel greater loyalty to the Serbian motherland than to Bosnia, and some still support the leaders who brought war to this country. Macho values handed down from one generation to the next. Dragomir raises bulls for these fights. He says occasions like this bring different groups together, and that Bosnians will not risk a return to war.
I don't think it will happen again in our generation, but the big question is what will happen with younger people now growing up. I took part in the war, and I've had enough. If other people want to fight, they can, but not me.
This is Mostar in the south of the country, of course famous for its bridge, now rebuilt after the fighting that took place here between Muslims and Croats in the early 90s. Today, Mostar is peaceful, but it's still in many ways a divided town. And in recent months, the system of local government here has almost completely broken down. At Mostar's fire station, a strike drags on. Morale is rock bottom. Salaries too low, equipment too old. Until Croat and Bosniak Muslim politicians get back to work, the firemen's complaints won't be dealt with, and Mostar will continue to drift.
This quarrel directly affects us. The parties from the Croatian and Bosniak political blocs cannot reach an agreement, and we are all suffering because of that. But we firefighters are united, and when we work, we don't care about the religion or ethnicity or color of the skin of somebody who needs our help.
This is Sarajevo, city of Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Salmir is a Bosniak politician. Like many in this country, he now worries that hardliners are winning out, that Bosnia's different groups are less willing to work with each other.
Now, the most popular politicians in Bosniaks, in Serbs, in Croats circles are ones who are talking just about nationalism, who are against compromise, and unfortunately the situation is like that.
Back at the fair, an epic struggle is underway. Now may be the time for the world to pay a little bit more attention to Bosnia. History tells us that things here can run out of control. Barnaby, PHILLIPS, Al Jazeera, Bosnia.
Well, let's continue our discussion now with Abdul Wahab Al-Kipsi from the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now, that we heard the unemployment rate in Bosnia is 40%. Who's to blame for that? And shouldn't the situation be a lot better 14 years after the conflict ended?
14 years, and according to most estimates, over $5 billion in international aid. And this is, by the way, that was a very good report. And it illustrates the point that we were talking about before, about the dependencies that international aid creates. Like I said, there is a tremendous need for international support, and Bosnia needed that international intervention. It needed the humanitarian aid, and it needed the infrastructure support that is almost complete right now. Bosnia is rebuilt when it comes to infrastructural needs. However, the support that the international community gave to Bosnia created, in my opinion, a lot of dependencies. Political dependencies at first, and economic dependencies. The political dependencies were that the political actors, the political parties, became accountable only to the international community, not to its own people. So we didn't see the build-up of the social institutions that were needed, that the political parties feel accountable towards. So as you see as you saw in the report, we see political competition gravitate towards ethnic affiliation. It's the same in Iraq, it's the same in many post-conflict countries, where people vote according to their identity, not according to political competition for platforms, for programs that will lower unemployment, lower inflation, and take care of the development structure of the countries, in post-conflict situations. The need right now is to shift in Bosnia towards making the decision-making for changing the decision-making into the local people taking risks, creating programs, and competing for that, not competing on identity and ideology.
When we look at reconstruction and development after a period of conflict, do countries run the risk of actually, at a time like this, of getting less aid, less help because of the recession, because of economic conditions around the world?
Especially Bosnia. Bosnia faced a tremendous cut down in aid after the Afghanistan war broke out, and of course after the Iraq war. International attention shifted tremendously towards Afghanistan and then Iraq, and left Bosnia. And it is time right now that we go back and pay a lot of attention for Bosnia, not necessarily for more financial aid, not necessarily for more billions in aid, but more towards allowing the local actors, the local political parties, to start competing on as what can I provide for my citizens, not who am I. You shouldn't vote for me because I'm a Bosniak, or because I'm a Serb, or because I'm a Croat. You should vote for me because I can provide a better solution than the next political party. That's where the attention should go.
That's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Well, that's all from Washington. Let's go back to Doha now.
Coming up after the break, we take a look at those countries coming out of the worst recession since World War II. And we speak to someone who predicted the recession.